Hello, everyone. The Westport Country Playhouse would like to welcome you to Coffee Break. My name is Jacob Santos, and I'm your host. So, this is the space where we talk to artists about their career, representation, about the work they've done here at the Playhouse. So, welcome back, everyone. And I'm actually, if you can't notice, in a new space today. So, it's no longer my bedroom. I am actually in a dressing room, which is really interesting. This seems so much more fitting for this show to be in like a theatrical space, and also the Wi-Fi is much better, so like that's a plus as well. Today I'm going to be talking with Jermaine Rowe, who just recently received an award in excellence for his performance as Mlima in Mlima's Tale, which we produced here in 2019 during our season. And I'm so excited to speak to him today because that was one of the first shows that I saw at the Playhouse when I started working here. And he's just such an extraordinary person, as you are going to see. Um, and yeah, I can't wait to have him on here. So let me see. Let me see. Nope, not yet. But yeah, Jermaine is multi-talented. He's so great. He was in our production of Mlima's Tale. He played the main title role of Mlima, and he was also in our production of Man of La Mancha. So great productions. Yeah. Let me see. Let me wait for him. Yeah, but we are so extremely proud of Jermaine for receiving this honor from the Connecticut Critics Circle Award. So we're going to talk to him about that, like how does it feel to like receive an award, and yeah, we're going to talk about his career and about his role. I actually see that he just popped on, so Jermaine, I'm going to send you a request. There we go. As I say every week, waiting for the guest to join is always the most nerve-wracking part of every single episode of this. There we go. So y'all know what I'm seeing. It's just loading right now. Still waiting for Jermaine to pop on. But thank you everyone for joining. If you just hopped in, my name is Jacob Santos. I'm the host of Coffee Break, and today I'm speaking with Jermaine Rowe, who played Malema in Malima's Tale. Whoop. Let me see. Let me try one more time. Okay, there we go. There we are.
It's so nerve-wracking.
I know technology scares me so much, but we're so reliant on it.
It's okay.
Yeah, but you're here, Jermaine. Thank you, and welcome to Coffee Break. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. From my visual, you're frozen. I don't know if that's what's happening in general, but I'm good. I'm really, really good. Um, Having a nice day today.
Awesome, awesome. Well, firstly, congratulations on your award for the Connecticut Critics Circle Awards. Like, I have to ask you, so as an actor, you do the work for the work. You do it for the artistry, you do it for the character. You don't do it for like awards. But when it does come around that you are recognized by an institution or organization, how does that feel for you, and like how does it make you look back on like the work that you did?
Well, I mean, I think before I answer that fully, I was going to say thank you for Westport to providing this platform, one, and also giving me the opportunity to come back and do Malima's Tale. And I think of course, it's a part of you when you do a role that you think about the possibilities of awards. But this was one of those roles that I genuinely had a great time developing and doing, and one of the roles that I always wanted to play. And so I was fortunate to have an amazing team of other actors, Janine, Edith, and Carl, who were wonderful, and the entire creative team was wonderful. So when the award came my way, it was just another reminder of the family and support team that I had. It came at a really weird time, I think, in the middle of everything right now to get an award. I remember posting about the juxtapositions of emotions right now, like high
Mm,
celebration, like what's going on in the world. So it was not like what I thought winning an award would be like.
mm,
Um, Very humbling, and every now and again having those checkpoints in, I suppose, validation from a community is very humbling and honoring. And I think it's just a wonderful icing to a cake that I was already fulfilled with Mlima and the role of Mlima. So anything from that was just gravy.
hmm And for anyone who didn't have the opportunity to actually see the show, so the character you played, Mlima, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the character itself and like how it exists inside the show, and also like what it took to actually get into character and like find that character, because it's a very extremely physical role.
Yeah. So Malima's tale tell the story of Malema, who is this elephant that gets killed for his tusks, and we journey with his tusks across the world, as opposed to Asia, where it's sold in a high-end store. And Lynn Nottage wrote this really brilliant, beautiful play, and I think one of the difficult things when I first saw the role was the fact that after the first monologue, which is a good, very physical, about 10-15 minutes of work, the character dies, and then we journey with his spirit across the travel of this journey. And so getting ready for that, I was very fortunate. Very few times that you get a role that you have a lot of time to prepare. So Mark Lamus, who's the wonderful director, approached me after I have done Man of La Mancha first at Westport, and a few months afterwards reached out to me and suggested and asked if I was able to play the role. So the first one of the most beautiful moments where, as an actor, you always want to be given an opportunity, and I think at the end of the day, you want to be given an opportunity. And then
Mm,
here, I'm given an opportunity by Westport, and it was such a serious moment for me because I'd seen the show at public whenever it was done sometime before, and I loved it so much. And I teach as well as a professor. I took my students to see it twice, and my friend Sain Goja had played Mlima, and I fell in love with the role. So when I was asked to play it, it was like get rid of what I saw before to be able to approach it from my perspective and where my body lived and my storytelling lived. And because I had time in the show, the first moment in the show talked about listening and being aware of everything around. I did a lot of listening exercises with the world. So I would sit on a park bench and do these exercises where I try to listen to everyone who's ever sat on that bench before I did. And it was allowing my imagination to be open. And then physically, I'm a smaller person and I have to play this massive big tusker elephants. So I started researching a lot of what elephants did and how they interacted with each other. And then I started to work out. I started to, because my background was a former dancer, I didn't want to rely on that level of moving. I wanted to approach the truth of Malima's moving. So I
mm.
leaned into what was called Alexander technique, which is this wonderful technique I learned in grad school at Sarah Lawrence College by June Ekman. And I started to figure out how to keep my body active while also not losing my voice speaking that wonderful monologue. And it was a lot of trial and error to find the right balance between being physical and also not losing my voice and also still communicating the story. So there was a lot of trial and error. And then we had the wonderful Jeffrey Page, who was a movement director, who came in the room with Michael, who also the fight captain, that really worked with me and tried to help my body understand how to move it in time and place. Because at the end of the day, as an actor, you want to live truthfully in that situation. And because the role was so emotionally draining, I want to make sure that my body was prepared every night to go through that process. And what was wonderful about the backstage crew and the other actors, they gave me the space every show to do that. They know every show before 30 minutes before the show, Jermaine was in his zone. They knew how to give me the space to land into that role every night. And also after the show to give me the space to release the role because it was a show that I chose to stay in the moment the entire show every night, which was physically very demanding.
Yeah, wow. And you mentioned at the top of the show you have like this 15-minute monologue, and I remember seeing it on opening night. I don't know if you remember this, that there were some technical difficulties with the projection. So you were in the middle of your monologue, they stopped you, they're like, "Y'all, we have some technical difficulties. We're gonna start from the top." Like, when that happens as an actor, how do you still stay in the moment and don't get freaked out about like something going wrong? So like how did you approach that moment on the first opening night of the show?
Preparation. It was literally my preparation came in and supported me. I remember when that moment happened, I was so in the moment in the rehearsal and I found out somewhere, I'm very much of the thing that you don't mark the rehearsal room. And at a certain point in the rehearsal room, after we got all the logistics taken care of, like learn the lines and the blocking and all of this, I started to push myself to always be present and always do the show full on out. So by the time we got to opening night and we had done some preview nights, I'd gotten used to doing the show full on out in my body and what I needed to prepare for. So before every show, I would do what I call my 30-minute dance solid disco party where I would put my headphones in and dance nonstop, and I'd pump my body with endorphins so I would be able to handle emotionally what I was going to go through. So an opening night, I was in that zone and I was backstage doing my prep, and I went on stage. I remember seeing, I think it was David running down to say the show's going to stop. And I clocked that was happening and I went off stage, and without shifting a beat, I went right back into pre-show mode. And the other actors were so wonderful. They ran across around to see if I was okay. And I remember Janine going, okay, don't talk to Jermaine, he's in his zone. And they immediately got that I didn't shift the beat, because I also recognized that Mlima, because the story was about this character that was going to die after the first scene, I needed to have set the tempo so well so that other actors could do their job. Because it's Malima's tale. If you don't buy Mlima in that first 15 minutes, then the show doesn't work. So I could not allow myself to be broken, because I also knew a wonderful team of actors and stage crew were behind me, who were waiting for that moment. And if I dropped the ball, the entire show would not have worked. So I leaned into that preparation, and I trusted the other actors, and they trusted me.
Awesome. Y'all, you can see why Jermaine was awarded excellence in performance. Like the richness and the deepness of your preparation showed so much that night and throughout the entire run. So kudos to you for that. And I
Thank
think
you.
one of the extraordinary things about Malima's Tale here, like the production here, was to see all the opportunities for students to come see the show. So we had a student matinee come, and like bus loads of students came on to see the show. And I remember they had me go out to some of the buses to get them into the theater, and they gave me like a long list of rules for them to adhere to. And I was like, these are high school students. I don't know. Okay, I'll try. But yeah, and you could just see them in the audience like gaining so much from it. And I
What
know,
was great,
yeah.
I actually was able to meet those students beforehand. I work part-time as an adjunct professor and an educator, so I'm huge on educating and mentorship. It's something that I benefited from. Like I'm a recipient of a lot of mentors and wonderful people who showed me the way. And so I'm eager to share that. And so Westport, I think they got a grant, and they allowed me to go into, I think, two of these high schools, and I workshop ideas with some of these students. So they met me before seeing the show, and we worked on some of the blocking, and I talked to them about my process, and I taught them some of my movements. So when they came to see the show, what was really exciting was I think a student audience is wonderful because they react right away. You know, adults, we learn the etiquette of theater. We come and we appreciate its silentness sometimes. And the students reacted in ways that really made what makes theater so wonderful even more wonderful. They reacted in the moment. What was happening on stage in the moment was real, and they were feeling it, and they responded to it. So it pushed the performance level up. And student matinees are so early in the morning, so you need that energy in the morning. But yeah, I loved when the students came.
Mm-hmm, definitely. And can you go into more, like you said, you are a teacher and you love mentorship. So, and you said like a little bit about that, but if you can go deeper into like why that's so personal for you or why you're so passionate about being a mentor to students.
Well, yeah, I mean, I work part-time now as a CUNY adjunct professor at LaGuardia Community College. And right when I left grad school, I went to Sarah Lawrence College. Sarah Lawrence immediately offered me a job there. So I worked my first year out of grad school, both at Sarah Lawrence and LaGuardia, while also acting. I don't know. But I found at some points in my career, there was a gap. There were gaps that I really needed information. And I'm of the belief that if you see something missing in the world, you become that thing. If you see there's a missing, if you want wealth in the world, you start creating it. If you want mentorship in the world, you become a mentor. And so I decided, instead of complaining about the fact that there is this lack of mentorship, that I wish that there were more, as I started teaching, particularly at LaGuardia, I was seeing a lot of students who represented me, a diverse community, immigrants, young men of color, young women of color, trans-identified students, all across the spectrum who needed just guidance to say, you're possible. And so I started to make sure that not only was I teaching them, but I was taking them to see productions that they saw themselves on stage represented, and they could speak to actors. So Westport, the two productions I've done at Westport, they were wonderful. Where I took groups of students from LaGuardia, and they came to both of the shows, both Mlima and Man of La Mancha, and they met with actors, they connected with them, and then they would use the show and write reviews about. And then I try to connect them with actors outside of the space, and I take them to see other productions outside of New York. And I have a group of young men that I mentor in particular. And one of the things that I do with them is I try to like help them to apply for colleges or look up, because sometimes I think those simple things about where to go study, where would you find your voice, where could you find your voice, may seem like known information, but it blew me away that as I was teaching at these community colleges, that some of these wonderfully talented students weren't seeing plays. They didn't know anyone who was an actor professionally. And I wanted to create that, to demystify that gap, that it is possible. And sometimes just speaking to someone else and seeing that they're possible makes you realize that there's a space and platform available.
Definitely. And I feel I relate to that so much because I attribute my success or me even being in this industry to the mentors that like opened the door for me. I feel like especially for like brown and black kids, like we don't magically just fall into theater because the American theater is like this elitist institution. So it needs people who are on the inside to open those doors for us and really like be intentional and proactive about that. So that's so amazing to hear. Thank you for that.
Of course, thank you too.
Yeah. And I was wondering, talking about like representation and opportunities, I was wondering if you could talk to me a little bit about the show that you created, The Children from the Blue
Yeah.
Mountains. Like, what what is to create a show?
Well, it's, one of the things I embrace, and Sarah Lawrence College taught me this, is process over product. So it was more throwing myself into a process and see what happened. I always wanted to be a creative artist and create my own platforms. I think the first memory of myself was creating shows and stories at home as a 5, 6-year-old kid. And I found really early in my life that I had a lot of gifts as a thespian. I could sing, I could act, I could dance, I could write. And my mom was very, very encouraging to always push me to, if you're going to do something, make sure you're doing it at a high level. And so when I decided there was a moment that happened. I was in this wonderful show called Fela on Broadway, and Fela closed. And talking about mentorship, some of my mentors in this side of the world, of course, starting with Professor Rex Nettleford, who's a former dance director of National Dance Theatre Company of Jamaica. But I ended up meeting like Arthur Mitchell and working with him from Dance Theatre of Harlem, and then Bill T. Jones from Fela. And I started to see similarities in terms of connection. And so after Fela, I found myself not being able to book a show. I was out there auditioning, and I was like, this was like not clicking. I was hearing how great I was, but nothing was happening. And so I decided first to create my own platform. So I wrote a one-man show, and I did it off Broadway at Tada Theater at this festival, Emerging Art Theater. And it was so successful, it scared me. It made me go, oh, you have no excuse to not do work because you can do work. And so as I wrote that, I realized there was a gap in my knowledge. So I started to search for programs to figure out and I started to look for an MFA in theater making and acting, and Sarah Lawrence popped up. And so when I went to Sarah Lawrence, there was a musical theater development program that was taught by Shirley Kaplan and then Stu Stewart, who wrote Passing Strange. And I kind of took this idea and I started to, in the class, play around with this folkloric idea that I had. And that's where my musical started. And fast forward a few years later, I started to recognize that this musical now has the opportunity to create space for other performers. And so I entered the Eugene O'Neill Festival with it, and I got shortlisted. And from that, LPAC took it up and started to assist me in just being the house that supported the work development. And right before COVID happened, or right after COVID happened, we were supposed to do this major workshop in April of the work, and it got postponed because of everything. But it's just one of those things again where I go, if you see something missing in the world, you create it. And I can't complain that there's not enough work that represent me if I have the potential to create work. And so alongside performing in Mlima's Tale, I was also being a geek at watching everybody else in the room. When I wasn't on stage, I was in the audience watching the designers design. I was watching how Mark Lamas worked to like steal from his brain. I was watching Lynn talking about the process and learning from her. I was watching all the other actors go for their beats and their objectives and learning from them. I became a geek to the process because in the same time, I was also creating my own platform and work. And I wanted to see what worked and what didn't work.
Mm, definitely. I feel like you and many other artists now in the field represent this kind of new theater practitioner where you're kind of breaking the mold of not just one thing. So like you're not just an actor, you're not just a dancer, you are multiple things and you're creating multiple arts in different spaces. You're also writing, you're also producing and creating that platform for your own work. So like this idea that like artists aren't just one thing, I feel is like breaking now in the industry.
Oh, what though? To be honest, though, I don't think it's new. I mean, I'm standing on the back of the Jeffrey Holders and so many other people prior. I do think the industry sometimes has limited us to be wanting to explore that more in ourselves. But I do think an artist speak through many other mediums. And if you go as far back as to when the art became much more commercial, the Catherine Dunham was also doing art. There were all these wonderful, the what's her name, Eartha Kitt was singing and dancing and doing all these different things. And there were people who were writing their own shows. And I think we always, the Alvin Ailey was also doing other things. So there were always these other ways of exploring the dancers who were painters or photographers. And I don't think that any one of us necessarily only has one way of portraying the work. I do think that the industry sometimes asks us to choose, but I don't think that I think all of us have the capabilities and the potential because it all comes from the same source. Creativity comes from the same source. The medium through which you use it is only limited based on your mind. At least I believe that. So I've been fortunate to be put in platforms that have allowed me to explore all these avenues. But all my friends that I can think of who are actors or artists have these other facilities and on umbrellas. So yes, in one sense, our generation is making it a lot more available, but I absolutely don't think it's new. I think I'm standing on the shoulders of so many Renaissance men and women who have created their own platforms in so many ways before.
Awesome. Yeah, so said, so well said. And can you tell me, I'm interested, how long was it from when you put pen to paper for your show until like now? How long was that time period of crafting and developing this show?
In terms of years, it's about 4 to 5 years. In terms of absolute time, I don't know because I take breaks from my show. There are moments where I don't write from. I try not to write from my ego. I try to write when I feel inspired to write. So if I do a showing of the show, I might not touch it again for 6 months because I have nothing to say as an artist. One of the things I embraced was I was growing along with the writing. So there are parts in my life I had to experience before I wrote it. So the Children from the Blue Mountain actually centers around a young character, Jack Mandora, that goes to follow his dream. And in a world of chaos, in the middle of a hurricane, he's being told this his dream is not valid. Kind of very similar, I think, to what's happening now, where artists are feeling invalidated by what is a chaos. And we're feeling also not essential. And he's feeling not essential as his world is going through a storm, that he needs to be doing the practical things. And he's pushing himself to like try to find his dream. And the question of the story is, what is the cost of following your dream all the way to the end? Is it worth it? And there were parts of Jermaine that was still asking that question. So there were songs or scenes I couldn't write yet because I was still figuring it out. You write from what you know. So it took as long as it needed to have because I was still asking myself some of those same questions and I was willing to be vulnerable enough to put them in a work. And for it not to work, I think one of the wonderful things when you decide to write a play or put anything up is for it also not to work. And it's the mantra that you can't call yourself a successful person unless you're willing to fail. And so the process became a bit about 4 or 5 years, but within that, there were breaks in between for the work, for me to grow into the work and for the work to grow into me.
Awesome. And thank you for saying that because I feel like that's such a great thing to say that like the work grows with you and it takes time, and creating is actually a process. Because I feel like a lot of people in my generation and the one below, we've become really accustomed to instant gratification and like gaining a whole bunch of followers overnight, or getting like this success like in a couple of days or in a few months. But like when you actually think about the work and the artistry of it, it is a process, and it is a relationship between yourself and the thing that you're creating and putting out into the world. So it's not an overnight thing. It sometimes does take years to do.
Yeah, it does. And I think if you want the work to live beyond you, you have to be willing to take the time. That it takes time to get to greatness. It takes time to get to success. Nobody who's ever been successful, at least anyone that I admire or appreciate, did it overnight. I think it does take time. And I do, because I teach young adults who are like in their early 20s, and I have to remind them that like I know we live in a Facebook, Instagram world and TikTok. Everything is immediate. You get the likes right away, but anything of value will take time to invest in. Relationships, work, relationship to your work. And that's what Mlima Taylor afforded me, a space and a time to be okay in stepping into something that when I first saw the script terrified me. I did not know if I was going to be successful in it. That was what made me actually want to do the work, because there was a possibility that it was not going to work. That I was stepping into something that was beyond what I had done before. It was my first major lead role. And then Westport decided to put me on the poster, so no pressure. So it was like, okay, I had to step up to this plate. And I think that amount of pressure, it forces you to grow beyond if you allow yourself to be okay in your process. And the space afforded me to do that.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Jermaine, we have some questions from some community members. One of them you actually might know. So Carlos Encinias, who was our guest last
Oh,
week, who is a Man of La Mancha with you, wants to know, how did you find the inspiration to play the main horse in Man of La Mancha?
Same with everything. There are no small roles. Like I'm huge geek as an actor, so I actually did a lot of homework in terms of how horses moved, and everything for me. Like when I was working with Jeffrey Page a lot, one of the things that we talked about with Mlima is the impulse to move. Why am I making this choice? Why am I moving? So even a simple role as the horse for me was I went back and I did a lot of research about movement, and so it was always storytelling. It was always what is the story within this movement? What was the horse? So I'd given him a whole internal life, and I went to my active process, and I was like, even if it's a 5-minute horse, it needs to tell a story.
Awesome. Yeah.
A geek.
And I love it. I love it. I feel like I relate with that so much, because I feel like when we love something so much, we want to know all aspects of it, or we want to know deep into things. So definitely relate to that. Yeah. And now another audience member, Angie Palacios, wants to know if you can talk about a major obstacle that you overcame in your work in being an actor.
A major obstacle. I mean, there's so many. I think the two that kind of jumps at me. The first one is a personal thing, which is self-doubt. Um, for a long time, I had imposter syndrome. I was seeking validation outside myself. I was seeking the approval outside myself. And it took me a while to redefine. And it was when I redefined success for myself, what it meant for me to be successful, and start to be really honest with myself about my shortcomings and my strength, that I started to grow as an actor. So that was an obstacle for me when I first came, like, because I moved from Jamaica to New York. And there were other things as an immigrant that you move, you try to understand your relationship to yourself and Black American experience and understanding that and everything else that surrounded that. But for a long time, there was the self-doubt. There was imposter syndrome. Um, what helped me to get over that were, one, I have really amazing friends. Like I have some of the best friends in the world who are very supportive. Um, but also I challenged myself to learn. So I became a geek. I used to go to the New York Performing Arts Library and sit down for hours watching films, watching other people attempt the craft. I started to stand in line as a student and watch other people perform when I first came here. And I became a student to the craft that I was investing myself and life in. And then once I started to really apply myself to get to the craft, I recognized that it was possible.
Hmm. Awesome. Awesome. Well, Jermaine, before I let you go, I want to ask you one more question. is there a piece of media or content that you've been consuming during this time, whether it be a book, a play, a movie, TV show, a podcast, something that you've been consuming during this time that you can recommend to the audience?
Well, I took a moment from like consuming because I was just riding my bike everywhere and taking in the world and observing people when I could. But I started reading a lot of there's a writer called Khalid Asani, and he writes. There's a few books: A Thousand Splendid Sun, Kite Runner, and The Mountains Echo. There's three books. What I love about his work, it's called what I call fictional cultural anthropology. It's set in Afghanistan. It talks about these wonderful human beings who are living under just different types of regime and how they keep their spirit alive, how they still find love and friendship and family, even in regimes that can seem, from our perspective, really inhumane. So Khalid Asani has become, I just finished rereading A Thousand Splendid Sun. He's one of those writers who feels like they're talking to you as you're reading the book. So he's been someone that I've really enjoyed reading.
Definitely. Well, Jermaine, thank you so much for joining me here.
Thank you.
And congratulations again so much on your honor.
Thank you. And I wanted to thank Westport again and you for this platform. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Of course. Well, have a great day, Jermaine.
You too. Thanks everyone for watching, and thank you for sending your questions in.
Jermaine is the reason why I love actors so much and like that artistry. So that you could see from what I'm saying, he goes deep into the work. When we talk about the work, like that is a perfect example. The research, the building the muscles of it, the references, like going into a space and like seeing the designers to see what they're doing, looking at the director to see what he's doing, and then learning from that. Like that collaborative experience that what theater is, he threw himself into that, and I feel like that's so inspiring. I feel like that's like what I love to see in artists, and this is why like I created this show and this space to do that, to like learn about that actor process. So Jermaine, thank you so much, and thank you to all of you for joining us today. We will be back again next week at 4 p.m. Thank y'all so much. Have a great day.